what was interesting when I was listening through some of the other podcasts you've done recently was this kind of sense of, I wouldn't say winging it, but this kind of sense of like, there was like an endearing kind of moment when you said that you didn't have insurance for a while. Um, yeah, I probably should get you to introduce yourself first. I'm pretty bad at doing that, but just bring us up to speed with who you are and what Morrama's all about. You've probably hopefully nailed down what that kind of pitch is now. Have you had a few goes at it with others? But what exactly is Morrama to anyone that hasn't got a bloody clue what it's all about?
Morrama is an industrial design agency. We're based in Shoreditch in East London. We're a team of 8, and we our target kind of client, I guess, is predominantly startups.
Right.
Uh, so that doesn't mean that we rule out working with other agencies. It just, sorry, with other companies. It just means that our process is very much targeted towards kind of bringing new innovative ideas to market, uh, making products that can go to manufacture, working quite lean and de-risking projects as we go through, so that, but at the same time making sure that there is something that is different and that there has a
Mm,
reason for it to exist in the market. Otherwise, obviously, a startup's going to fall flat on its face if it doesn't do anything new and
mm,
exciting. So that's yeah, that's essentially what we do, and that encompasses obviously the product end to end, so literally from that napkin sketch to manufacture, but also throughout that process, we typically end up doing the brand, do the packaging,
mm.
sometimes all the way through to logistics and art direction and support, onwards from there, really.
Yeah, I suppose startup is one of those where it's like they always say go niche, don't they? So it's like niche enough in the sense of there is startups are quite niche, but it's also broad enough for you and the team where you've got something new coming in all the time. And so, it's not just travel stuff you're doing beauty, grooming, all that kind of stuff. So there's that perfect balance of, I'm sure there's risks that come with startups, right? Like they lose money and it's like crap.
Yes,
But there is a benefit as such of you can keep yourself and the team relatively creatively happy, which is
definitely.
rather than just the same old drug delivery, kind of auto injector. There's only so many times you can do that before you start to lose the will to live. So I presume, was that a conscious decision or just something that's just formed over time and you've just found your kind of place in the agency world?
It's definitely a conscious decision. It didn't feel like an area that was being really targeted by agencies, and there's an obvious reason why. I think if you're an established consultancy, like turning your attention just to working with startups, it is very, very difficult because of, you know, startups notoriously don't have a huge amount of money. But I think that if you get it, I'd like to think that we've we've got enough of kind of in our portfolio now, enough success stories under our belt that we attract those slightly higher caliber
Mm.
startups. When I say higher caliber, not to say that there's a differentiation between a good idea and a better idea, but just
It's
ones that have
not as
gone
not it's
slightly
not
further
like,
down the
yeah,
line.
it's not like Dragon's Den.
No.
Um, because you've worked in a startup quite recently, Drew, and you just the other kind of side of it. I personally quite like working with startups. I mean, I do a little bit with it, and I've always found that it's not as process heavy, and so you can have a little bit more influence on something, which I've
Yeah,
always personally enjoyed.
I think that can be a good and a bad thing. I
Of
think that
course, yeah.
can swing wildly as
Mm,
well. Like being able to be flexible is cool, but not having documentation of your uh, design development, not having traceability can be a silver bullet as well. So it's interesting that you specialize in that and that you set out to do that as well. I think that's very cool because a lot of the time I suspect that agencies kind of just uh, adopt the shape of the niche that they end up in, rather than setting out to do something like that. So, like, was that something that? I mean, where did that come from?
When you start an agency, everybody says, when you start anything, to be honest, everyone says you've got to have a target audience. You've got to sort of start niche, even if you then sort of grow out from there. But the idea of pigeonholing ourselves into a category, especially because we weren't long off graduating. So for those who don't know, I founded with a co-founder, founded Morrama with a guy called Rob. He left after a year, but obviously we did start that journey together. And obviously thinking about what we wanted to do or how we wanted to specialize is really difficult because we were fresh from university. We didn't have a specialty. We didn't have a backstory where we could say, right, we have been working at furniture designers or a homeware design company or tech design company for the last 5 years. We already have that specialty. Let's just sit in that space. So it was like, okay, well, wherever we specialize, we're going to have to learn. We don't. And the thing about working with startups was that we could, as being a young agency, and doesn't take rocket science to work this out, we could charge less. We had to charge less because we weren't as experienced as those who were charging more, and startups could afford us. So we attracted the right client, and being able to, obviously we've had some critical decisions along the way where we obviously need to grow as an agency. Our overheads become bigger. How do we then charge more and maintain that startup client? But I think there are companies out there there are startups out there that are funded. People who invest in startups understand the cost of product development, and those startups are going to other agencies already. So why don't we just kind of scoop them up and take them ourselves? And knowing that we understand the absolute ins and outs of the process of taking product to market as a startup, with an investor breathing down your neck, with time pressures, with people who've pre-ordered your product, and we absolutely get it. We've gone through that process, and that is the only process we go through. So startup can be very comfortable knowing that they're in good hands, not just from a design perspective, but from all the other little bits and pieces that they don't necessarily even know about. So it's an education process as much as a design process.
Yeah. What would you say, percentage-wise, of your clients where the actual decision maker or, I don't know, founder is not actually a designer by trade, and so it's just someone with an idea? Do you find you're still communicating with a designer kind of in-house, or it's like, I don't know, a physician or a doctor, or just it's someone from a different walk of life that just needs that design expertise?
In fact, I think only one project that we're working on at the moment, the founding team has an element of a design background, but mostly it could be anything. I mean, as you say, we've got marketing backgrounds, physicians, and eye specialists. They can be from all walks of life.
Yeah, it's quite nice, though, isn't it, when you get someone who's an expert in something that you know it exists, but you don't know much behind that initial sort of layer. And when you get to hear these people who maybe come up with a technology or an algorithm or something, and they just have this sort of more and more knowledge. The more conversations you have with them, something else gets revealed. Like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah,
that must be a nice kind of a nice easy motivation for the team as well.
The best thing about it is that we are working with the people who have had the idea. Yeah. It's not like, okay, there's a CEO all the way up there, and then there's like 5 levels down the ladder. We're dealing with someone, and it's not their money, and that's just their job that is kind of on the line here. It's not their reputation or their career or their business. But the people we're working with, it does mean that much to them. And as a result, yes, it's high intensity, and yes, the risks are slightly, there's kind of a lot on the line, but the passion is there. The real drive is there, and it's really exciting when it all works and it all comes together. Like, they're just genuinely, the excitement's real, like really real, and we really feed and thrive off that.
Yeah, this might kind of transition nicely into a listener question. Sometimes it doesn't always go as plain sailing as this. So we get listener questions now, and I feel like I have to ask the listener question, because if I don't, then I just get mauled, basically. So you've asked me for these questions, and you're not even bloody told the person what the question is. So this is from a chap called Anthony that emailed in, so thank you for that. And he actually said, Drew, I wish you were around when I was graduating. And I'll stretch that message to you. I thought it was a nice thing for someone to say, Drew. And we didn't even have to pay them to say it. So thanks for that. Yeah. So he said, how, this may not be as relevant now, no, it's kind of pure startup, but how did you get a seat at the table with clients who already had well-established relationships with other agencies? Maybe that's not a battle you've had to face as much, or
Um, we have actually just taken on a project where they previously had worked with other agencies, and actually we have taken on projects halfway through that have started in other agencies, and then the client sort of fallen out of love or made a realization that actually there's someone better out there. uh, I think the thing is that everybody offers something slightly different, and sometimes, I mean, some established companies will deliberately seek to bring on new agencies every time they've got a creative process that needs to happen, because they want a new take on something. And I think that's a really good thing to do. Obviously, then it means that you as a company, when you do have you as an agency, when you do have like a brand who seem to be quite loyal to you, you always are kind of in the back of your mind that they might change their mind and seek to do exactly the same and hop to another creative team. And you kind of have to be okay with that. So it kind of goes both ways. I think if it was me, I think the most important thing is to put yourself in their position. Like, if it was you, what would you want to do? And I love working with other creative teams and seeing what insights they bring. So why wouldn't you? I mean, even people who've got in-house designers often bring external creative teams in. And I think it's just about being quite bold about what you can potentially offer that does differ from what they've had before, but also acknowledging that you don't know everything, and you would always, if possible, would love to have a kind of crossover where you could glean as much as you can from that previous team. I know that that's often not something that happens, but yeah, trying to kind of not disregard what's happened before, but learn from it and acknowledge that, and then take it in a different way.
because you've always kind of liked that external team, haven't you? Because we spoke about it before. You didn't see it as this threat of who are these people and why are they doing design work, but it's like, finally I've got another creative I can actually talk to that might actually understand the pain I'm going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like we said before, I've definitely worked in teams where the prospect of working with an outside agency is met with like, oh, well, why? What's wrong with us? Like we're here. Oh my god, we could do it for so much cheaper. But yeah, and it's as Joe says, you bring on a fresh pair of eyes and someone that's maybe just working in a different way. Often when you're in house, you're working in the confines of that house, of that of their processes. And if you're not bound to that, then you can kind of do things a little bit differently. And that's all. I think that is helpful. Sometimes it's jarring, and sometimes it doesn't work. And maybe that's why teams switch halfway through or partway through. And I know that I've also worked at companies where like they've got maybe, I think at one point, one project, 3 different agencies working in parallel behind closed doors, not sharing, but doing parallel work to get to this sort of almost like a Dragon's Den situation where you turn up, they turn up with the concept.
Judges' houses or something.
Oh my god, yeah, like turn up and you go, that's so expensive to do. Whereas you could have just got like just one team or a couple of different bits of insight, and it's really kind of self-defeating. But no, I mean I love it. You get to, when you're in house and surrounded by people who are not designers. And I don't mean that as any disrespect. It's just like when you get to hang out with a team of them for a few weeks at a time, that's awesome. And you learn loads and you grow, and you sort of go, we don't typically do things like that, and I wonder how we can fit it in, So I think that's cool. And what I was going to ask Joe is, like, how much of it do you get to do these days? Because you talked about it being a lean, small team. I just wondered, does that mean that you still get to kind of roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty?
Yeah, definitely. I absolutely love being involved in the creative process still, and whether I obviously don't do as much as before. I do take slightly more of a creative director role than being involved in leading projects, like kind of day to day, which I think suits me better because I mean, I can hit a deadline. Like I'm very aware of being able to hit a deadline, but I tend to be very easily distracted. So being able to kind of bounce from project to project suits me quite well. And but I mean, last week I was surface modeling stuff in 3D until the wee hours, because it was like I just wanted to get this one curve that wasn't quite right, and sharing that backwards and forwards with one of the other team members. When I say wee hours, I mean like 9 p.m. Like we never work late nights.
Yeah.
That feels like the wee hours to me. And then I mean, but then also this week, like yesterday, I spent an entire day just on business development and okay, what's Morrama going to look like next year, and constantly kind of thinking more about that as well. So it's a kind of a mix of everything, and at the moment it's a really happy medium. But obviously one of my focuses is like, how do I maintain that role as we grow bigger and there is more managerial stuff to be done, and do I make the decision of taking that on myself or trying to bring someone else in that can support that?
Did you find any challenge as you're like, I'd imagine part of that is that you have to give up a little bit of control to the other designers to actually run things, but did you find that, like, I use Layer as an example because I remember that certain kind of clients they were working with Layer because they wanted to work with Benjamin Hubert. That is why they wanted to work with them. So when he is now not involved in that work and it's just one of his staff, it's like, well, we wanted to work with you. We didn't want to work with this guy. But did you find any where it's like, actually, I'm probably not going to be as involved in this as much, and we've got a great member of the team here that can pick it up? But did you find any, not conflict, I'm trying to think of the right word, but or did you fear that there might be resistance of, actually, now I'm handing it over, that maybe I might lose some work off the back of it? Have all clients been fine in that kind of regard?
Clients have been fine. I don't think I've ever really been the face of Morrama.
Right.
It's something that perhaps is, as I do more of these podcasts and stuff like that,
Yeah.
like people put a name and a face to me as the lead. But no, I mean, I don't think that there's been any problems. To be honest, the pandemic's really helped me feel more comfortable with relieving control on projects, because I have had no choice when I'm not in the office with the team day to day. They've picked up more and more responsibility, and you just find stuff happens, and it's amazing, and you kind of get to feed it. But we have lots of touch points throughout the week where we can just sit, critique, feedback on, just review work. So it's very, very collaborative. And as I said, I'm not really the lead on projects anymore, the person that client is expecting to be their kind of go-to. And so, we fortunately never had that problem. But I've also never at any point has the agency been called after my own name,
Sure.
which obviously Benjamin has probably had that challenge. So, I'm fortunately will never have to have that. Never have that.
So tell us about the last year then, because following you on Instagram, I've always got the impression that it's kind of remote working slightly pained you in the sense of you're not around the team. Has it been an okay thing, remote working? Have you dying to get yourself back into the studio with the guys, or what's the state of play on that?
Of course, I mean, I miss everybody a lot. Everyone's been incredible. The team's been absolutely incredible in handling it. I think we've done the most important thing has been just supporting each other in terms of just like, how are you doing? Checking in with people, and just making sure that on those moments where we're all feeling a bit frazzled and a bit frustrated, especially kind of towards the end of the summer last year, that we were trying to just give people like a little bit of space, a bit of time. Perhaps things took a little bit longer to get done, but the standard of work never dropped. Obviously, I miss the team a lot. We have to, the nature of the work, kind of go in every now and then to pick up things, like get prototypes, share stuff around, and review physical kind of stuff together, and when we do so in as safe way as we possibly can. But coming out of this on the other side, we haven't really said this to anyone yet, but we're actually going to be moving into a new space. Obviously the team know this isn't going to be the first time that they hear about it, but yeah, we're really, really excited, and it's a much bigger space. It's going to be our own space because we've always been in a kind of co-working environment, which just in some ways, as we were a small team, was a really, really good thing to have a community of creatives around us that were doing all slightly different things. But this is going to be the first time we've had our own office, and I think that feeling of we're exiting this period of I wouldn't say isolation, because obviously we're with each other all the time online, but this idea that we can go back into a physical space, a space that is a blank canvas for us to work out how we want to use that week in, week out, and even day by day, and whether it and not as a space where it's like, okay, here's my desk, I go in, I sit down, I put my headphones in and work, because obviously we can just do that at home, and we know we can do that now. But really a kind of a space to play, to collaborate, to make. And yeah, so come May, when things start to move out, like we're allowed out again, that's something we're all really looking forward to.
Good. Well, congratulations on that. I'm sure it'll be one of those things where you'll look back over the, I don't know, 6-7 years and think this is another little landmark moment. We've got our own space now. So well done. I suppose that's the it's nice to hear some positivity.
I suspect there's going to be a lot of team outdoor activity days across the UK once we're allowed to do that kind of thing. Going and doing it's a knockout and the wipeout type of things that the big corporations send you on. I don't know if your team would do that kind of stuff, because when you're a small team and you're in each other's working environment all the time anyway, you perhaps don't need so much of that. You've probably got a good camaraderie anyway, but some of the bigger organizations, you don't know the names of most of the people in the building.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I was chatting to someone the other day, and they were mentoring a couple of young kind of grads, and it's been a year since they left university now, but they've been working, but they've never ever worked in an office. They don't know, they've never met their employee, they don't even know what the office environment's like. And it's to think that is it's really strange. I mean, I've got a team member that I've never met face to face, and a lot of work has been done on that kind of onboarding and how we integrate people into the team who aren't there physically. And actually, it kind of works when everyone's remotely. You're all on the same page, and I think it's going to be a really interesting challenge that we face ahead of us when some people are like, well, actually, no, I kind of like working from home, but then everyone else goes back into the office.
Yeah. There's lots of very nervous people in like talent acquisition at the minute, where they're like, I think if we don't do this right, 10 or 15 of us, they're all going to bugger off and leave, basically. There's very lots of, if you know anyone in internal recruitment, they're quite a nervous bunch at the minute. But one thing that we did, well, I said, I don't know about Drew, but I wanted to talk about, because we was on, I don't know if you remember, Drew, but we was on a bidder webinar. Was this a couple of months ago? You were speaking, and you talked quite, it was great actually. It was about this kind of integration of design and business, if I remember rightly, and I don't know if it was your brother that was in a slightly different discipline, but there was this real integration at an educational level. Didn't know if you could contextualize that maybe for the people that are listening, because I thought that was just a really interesting observation, and is a definite challenge that I know a lot of people go through in terms of how do you actually learn business. So if you could, don't know if you had, you could just expand on that for the people that are tuning in.
Yeah, definitely, because obviously our nature of work with startups, we really understand the impact our decisions as designers have on the business, with regards to the cost of the product, the cost of development, the even the kind of the user experience, and therefore the proposition that you're putting to the customer, and how you make that sale. But mostly around sort of logistics as well. And there's very little understanding, I think, from a lot of designers with regards to the real impact that their decisions are having on potentially the business offering of that product. And I think that needs to be more of that at university. There needs to be a better connection between the designers and the people in business, and whether that's like that they just need maybe a course on it. I mean, I know that a lot of design courses do have like a business module, but it's not really, I don't think it's enough. But it also, an easier way perhaps of doing that would be to offer some, that module or some classes alongside business school students. And the reference, the example that I mentioned on that webinar, Brad, was that my brother's an architect. No,
Right.
sorry, my brother's a civil engineer, but he studied alongside architects and they ran the course together. So they had a huge crossover. And obviously that's another area where you can obviously have architects who don't understand civil engineering and civil engineering don't understand architects. And when it comes to the actual, in the industry, and they end up working together on a project, they can't speak the same language, don't see eye to eye, then problems occur. And I think the same thing happens with with business decisions, and the designer is very much like stuck in their ways and wants to make this like aesthetics and user experience is king, whereas and kind of disregarding the business decision in the same way as, I mean, the other kind of side of it is designers and engineers often don't see eye to eye. And both
have we brought on any engineers? I don't know if we've brought on any engineers on Design Truth yet, have we?
I don't know any of them, any of the guests that would claim to be a full. But there again, actually, some of the early guests, I seem to remember us talking a lot about, about specifically design for manufacture. And I was going to say, Joe wanted to mention that. Then it's still part of that overlap, isn't it? You can't just have something that's desirable; it has to obviously be feasible and viable too. And I remember being in uni and a lot of time and attention spent on design for manufacture, different processes, and you'd run projects where you'd say, oh, it has to be injection molded or compression molded, whatever, and it has to feature a cantilever or something like this. So you're working on a snap fit or something like that. But it's rare that you have that same sort of angle in a uni project where you go, right, this is a cost saving design, and I think that would be, it's right, it's vital.
Yeah, we used to do a little bit of work with Brompton, and when they used to do a design task, like when I don't know, you've got to third into or something, and they say, go here's a task, or whatever. They would actually their task, I don't know if they do it now, is they used to give the person the bike. So they used to give them the bike and say, look, go and do your thing for a week with this bike, and then come back to us and then tell us how you reduce cost by 5% on the brakes. So it was very much that kind of, it was a business element to it, and from a design, even though it was like a design task, it was like, how do you reduce, the cost of this very small part of the actual bike itself? And it's one of those things where I'm hoping that if design and business did integrate at an educational level, that it would solve the portfolio conundrum of, you probably get far more sent to me than what I get, and I get quite a few, but it looks beautiful, but you wouldn't mass manufacture the thing. And it's like, maybe if there was that better education at an early level, that not many people would fall into that trap. I hope so anyway.
Definitely. It doesn't, not everything should be driven by business, but ultimately it is. Yeah. So I think it's just having an understanding about the implications of certain design decisions on, ultimately it's feasibility, but feasibility typically means is it within budget? Yeah. And so, because I mean, even complex injection, complex plastic parts, there always is a way to make them. They could be 3D printed, and you can 3D print anything, but it's not going to be within budget. So right. I think that that ultimately it's kind of, a lot of it is driven by business decisions, and I think designers kind of take the easy way out a lot of the time, and it's like, it just looks beautiful, but when you really take it apart, it's like, well, it's just not feasible.
Yeah, one of the things that I think, what's my route into this? Yeah, I think it's the consideration of the full range of stakeholder requirements at the start, rather than just like user requirements that I think we do naturally as designers. It's also, okay, well, here's your target cost of goods, for finish, and here's the manufacturing capabilities that are available to it. And I think like a full kind of rigorous way of looking at that. I know it sort of frightens people off when you talk to designers about, we're going to put metrics on all of this. You're going to be able to judge all of them, but like, it's super helpful. You get further down the line and you can decide whether your concept is actually hitting the brief or not, rather than trying to force it through verification or something like that and keep having to come back.
The biggest thing I think that it would really help with is that there are so many really good ideas that designers have, but they just don't know how to take them any further.
Mm.
And the really important thing is, like, how do you even know what to put in a pitch to potentially get it in front of an investor? And there's some incredible ideas that come out of the final year of university, and there's projects that are run alongside established brands, but there are plenty of ideas that designers come up with by themselves that could really go somewhere, but they just have no idea how to take that first step. So even if it was just that, getting to that first step where they would be able to get in front of the right people and even know who the right people are, I think that would mean that there's a lot of these ideas that are kind of created at university, when you've got kind of 7 to 9 months of just focusing on one thing, which we never get in an agency, that they might actually be able to kind of take those further and do something with them.
Yeah. It's funny, we had the grads on, didn't we? Drew, and they were talking about their final year projects, and they had about 8 on, Joe. They were like, it was a mixed bag of like different kind of things that they'd done post uni, and so we were talking about final year projects, and half of them were like, I wanted to keep the IP for this thing, and then the other half were like, nah. And it was everyone just had a very different kind of outlook on kind of what they would do with their final year project. But you're absolutely right. Some of it, you look at them on my phone and think, wow, this is amazing, but like, what's next? Where do you take this?
There are like accelerator programs. I know that there's a few up north, and then there's the CRL in London that do kind of sort of scrape the best from the universities and encourage them to go and take them further and offer them a platform where they can. And I think that they're great, but I just think that there would be so much more that you could put into a final year project if you even knew how to design it with business in mind from the beginning, rather than just kind of getting to that point where you've already graduated and now someone's saying, okay, now you can come and take it further. But I mean, obviously a lot of students do just kind of learn on their own. I know that for my final year project, it was a long time ago now, but it was such a simple project that I did do all of the costing, where it be made, how it be made, what the kind of how you would, what the cost, the retail price could be, and to realistically sort of build a business off of it. And that was, I found it really interesting. I can't imagine it was at all accurate. But at least I put the effort in.
What did you do for your final year project? Was it the whole final year?
It was just it's a module within the year, but it is quite a significant proportion of the final year at Brunel, where I studied. It was run alongside the guys at St Thomas's Hospital, and it was looking into hand weakness, particularly focused on young people, but I wanted to be as inclusive as possible. And it was literally as simple as, like, how does someone who's got hand weakness for whatever medical cause unlock their door, and
Right.
And so it was basically just like you see it seems loads of these like everyday carry little kind of leather key tidies, and it was basically taking that concept, but by literally as simple as putting 2 reinforcement little steel plates sewn into the leather sort of wrap. You ended up with a really strong kind of lever when you pulled the key out, and you had that kind of 90-degree sort of door handle style lever to be able to turn the key in the lock. And they were literally, that was it. And I had a kind of opportunity to take it to production, but it never really went anywhere.
When you think about it now, and like, all because I go through this sort of set of turmoil, what's your overriding sort of reflective emotion about your final year work now? Do you just kind of look at it as, oh, that's really cute, or are you like, oh my god, I missed something? So is there anything?
I'm still quite happy with where it went. I mean, I made a couple for my gran and her friends, and actually for like one of her friends, it was the without that product she couldn't unlock her door, and so it really did give her, I mean, she's like nearly 90 but severe arthritis, and without that she couldn't unlock the door herself, and so it gave her a level of independence and didn't rely on her husband. um so I think my biggest overriding feeling is a sort of like regret that I didn't do something about it, because, and I know that I know it's not too late. Like there are still people who have hand weakness, and there's still people who are old and have arthritis. So I still could. I still probably should. And I think
There's
that's
still
probably
time.
a bit. It's a sort of a shame cloud whenever I think about it that I haven't.
There's
But
still
there
time.
again, like you say, if someone used it and felt the benefit of it, then that's awesome. That's what you're trying to do with, if you grow up and you're pretty good at drawing, and then you can use that skill to make someone's life a little bit better. That's awesome.
That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why we're all here. Actually, we had a listener question from one of the grads to come, actually, and I'll give it to you because I'm conscious about time. It was from Honor Jennings, Drew, that we had on, and she asked Joe, what advice did you have for women in industrial design, but particularly for those that are in that kind of earlier stage of their career, so in that kind of first couple of years outside of uni, they're in this kind of journey, I hate to say the word journey, but kind of as they develop their career, what kind of, looking back over the last couple of years, what advice would you have for those in that position?
I think the biggest piece of advice I'd have is that actually you're in a really powerful position as a minority in the industry. Agencies need you, and I think that you should be quite vocal about that, especially like never ever be put off by applying to a male dominated industry, even if it doesn't feel right. But I think you should be quite clear about the fact that you are you want to encourage change and help them change. And I know as a a 21-year-old that seems like a really daunting thing, but they'll be very very open to listening to you. If they're not, then, well, I mean, raise it in the interview and ask them whether they would be, because if they say no, that's not really something we're interested in, then really I don't work there, because they're really. But honestly, any agency that is, and I know I've spoken to kind of agencies where they're really struggling with to sort of fix the imbalance of male to female in the within their team, and they are desperate to hire women, and they really struggle. I've honestly never had a problem finding females for my team, but I think obviously maybe they just that I naturally get more applications because we're already a 50-50 split, and making that kind of first leap and hiring that the kind of first few females onto a team that has been all or predominantly male is very difficult. But I think, yeah, don't underestimate your power as a female in the industry, and be very confident about that. Don't ever feel like you are there's anything you're not as good as anybody else, because you're honestly definitely probably better.
Similarly, what do you think that hiring managers or companies? I know like there's such a range of companies that I don't expect anybody can answer that in one go. But what can we do to kind of make it more clear that it's not even just like females welcome or something. It's like, come on, like where are the applications? Because that's the thing. When I've been hiring before, you get maybe one from a woman with a sort of a suitable bit of training or background or something, but the rest you get guys applying that maybe you're trying to hire an industrial designer. You get guys that are quality engineers, and it's not at all relevant. And I just want to know what we can do.
I think it's more about just making a conscious effort. Yeah, I mean, just to give you an example, earlier this week I did a talk at Nottingham-Trent, and there was about 200 kids on this thing. I mean, it felt like some sort of production line. I was like, Jesus, where are all these? Where are they going to put all these kids? When they actually get out to university. But one of the interesting observations I had was that after the talk, they said to me that the split was about 70-30. What I found really interesting is when I went onto my LinkedIn afterwards, I would say 90 to 95% of the students that connected with me on LinkedIn were women. Well, I thought it was a really interesting observation where it was like this kind of very much like they are there. Yeah, you've just got to make more of a conscious effort to to rather than relying on an application, you've got to put yourself out there a little bit more and start to engage at that kind of level. That I don't know from your experience, Joe, but I'm finding that a lot of the clients that I work with are far more self-aware of diversity now. Whereas if you to go back 4 or 5 years ago, it might get brought up in conversation. But I would say every time I bring on a new client now, that's probably the first thing they'll ever say to me is, "We need a woman in the team."
Yeah.
How do we go about it? And that's actually they're far more self-aware of that. I wonder if you had any insight of why that may be. I suppose definitely there's a definite movement happening. There's far more kind of vocal, and particularly out in the States. At the
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more people being vocal about it. It's been like a rumbling for a while, but I think more and more people are joining the conversation.
Mm,
With regards to how it can, how agencies can go about it, I think that there's some really obvious things that can be done. I mean, if a man's written a job application, make sure that a peer, somebody of an equal standing in the industry that is female, is looking over it. Doesn't have to be someone internal, but like, yeah, ideally, like a woman is so it's fair. Um, and in because you it's not it can be really easy, especially if you live and work in a male dominated kind of environment. Then the language that you use, the environment that the kind of that's created there, it is, without realizing, might be off-putting to
mm,
women starting, especially young girls.
mm,
um and I think that's an easy thing to do. The second thing is just how you put your portfolio across, how you present yourself online. I think, again, if you're an all male team or a majority male team, especially at the leadership level, then you're making decisions about how the work is portrayed. You're also making decisions about the work that you do, and I can tell. I know I mentioned this on a previous podcast, but I can tell if if a product's been designed by an all male team. There's just something about it, and I think that if that's not just me that can recognize that. And I think, women might feel like, well, don't really resonate with the work you're putting out, so why would I want to work it
Mm.
for your
mm,
agency? And obviously that's a much more difficult thing to change. But I
yeah,
think it's just, being aware of all the levels that this is, and the environment that you have in the office, potentially things that you do throughout the week, like, all going for beers on a Friday, and actually, well, some people might not want to do that.
mm,
Like the kind of events that you hold, the kind of, feeling the vibe in the office. All these, there's so many different things about that will help a woman feel perhaps more comfortable. Obviously, you have to make that first step. I know I've said this before, but I think that always the best thing is if you can hire the senior level, a female at the senior level, then it will instantly just trickle down.
mm.
Because but that is obviously difficult, because we have to encourage. We've
Yeah,
got such a poor split
it's
at the
not.
bottom that it's
Yeah,
not going to ever reach the top.
yeah.
um
But
but yeah.
it doesn't seem to be happening because I would agree with you in the sense of it should be a lot easier in theory to pick up a graduate female designer because I mean I'm just looking on that Nottingham Trent course for example, and it was like I had 30, 40 in my inbox inside 5 minutes. It's like I don't do graduate recruitment personally, but there's 30 or 40 there that are entering the industry, and that's just within a minute of them. So that there are out there. It's just let's not pigeonhole them into doing CNF work. Was one thing, and got to make more of an effort in actually kind of in bringing them. Even if you rather than just bringing in kind of one graduate at a time, can you bring in two or three? And so they come. So it's as a collective rather than just kind of because we've definitely had that issue internally in what I do for work is where we've had kind of more so kind of younger girls that have entered recruitment, but if they come in like one, it's far more difficult. Whereas if you bring two or three in at once, it's far easier for them to integrate into the company. That's from a personal experience that we've gone through. I don't know if you feel that's the same within design or not.
um I mean, it's always going to be difficult to be that first one,
Yeah.
like, no matter what happens. But there's plenty of things that needs to be addressed within women in design. The distinct lack of role models, the lack of teachers and tutors that are women, I think, is a huge problem. You might have a 50-50 split and be like, well, we're advertising that, this university course is nearly 50-50 male to female. It's like, yeah, but the teaching staff is 90% men. All the visiting lecturers are 90% men. Where's the role models for those women? They're looking, you're presenting such a different view of the future of their career versus their peer groups, that when they actually go out to get jobs, they're faced with something that feels so foreign to them that they might just be like, okay, well, I'll just go into research because there's more women there, or I might go into UX because there's more women there, and that's where I feel more comfortable. So I think that's certainly something that needs to be addressed. And I think there might be a slightly more difficult question to ask is the level of teaching that they're getting during the course at the same level, because they're being taught by men who perhaps don't know how to critique or hold back their critique of a female student's work. But that is a very broad brushstroke that
that's a conversation for a different set of episodes altogether. But I mean, you are right. I've spent some time talking to lecturers over the last couple of months when we started this thing. I remember when we first started, it was at 1 o'clock in the morning, and there's me messaging the lecturer at the University of Derby, for God's sake, saying we've got this podcast. Your kids should, your students should listen to this thing. And they're a slightly strange bunch, lecturers. They are very different. That's all I'll say. They are very different to, but the ones at Nottingham were lovely. So, as I said, I'm just conscious of time, and there was one question that we kind of wrap up an episode on, which I've already given you a slight heads up on, so you've had time to figure out what your answer may be. But the question is always the strangest brief you've ever been given. Now, I'm hoping you've been given some really strange ones at Morrama, maybe more so in the early days than now. But is there any particular that stand out that you look back on and you go, that was quite a strange brief?
You know what? The strangest ones are usually the ones that I can't tell you about, because they've forced me to sign an NDA. And then at which point I've signed the NDA and then received the brief, and I've been like, what the hell is this? No, we can't work on this. I don't think there's a reason for this to exist, but I actually can't then talk about it. But I mean, we've had some interesting projects for sure. I mean, some of them, like a couple of them, we have actually worked on, because after the initial sort of why they're kind of, there's quite an interesting rationale behind it, and there is quite clearly like a market. It's just that we didn't understand that market existed. But I mean, a couple, I mean, I did prepare a breast milk fridge, I think was one, a device that sort of prevented your business from making a splash in the toilet was one. A double-ended vape, that was another one. So yeah, I mean,
wait, which end was doubled?
As in, so you could vape from both sides.
Did that one go to market, Joe?
No, we didn't work. I mean, to be honest, I can't share too much about that project. So we didn't, but it wasn't as crazy as it sounds when you actually unpacked the rationale behind it. But yes, I mean, obviously, when you say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous.
I'm sure there's kind of the cogs are turning in Drew's mind now of some of those things you just mentioned, and he's probably thinking,
the first I've worked on the exact same briefs. Actually, yeah, given my my background and some of the companies that I've worked for.
You had some strange. Have you had any? I didn't ask you this question. Have you had any? What's the strangest brief you've ever been given?
I don't know if they're like that strange. It's all mostly medical. It's more like the process you go through. It's more like I've been out and bought strange things as sort of retail research when designing like pipes and tubes for people who are in intensive care and can't move and have to have incomings and outgoings all regulated, and there are products that are out there that do really similar jobs but just for different reasons, and you can go and get them on the high street. Now, when you put those kind of receipts through expenses, it's an HR problem that Julie had to step in and resolve for me. Yes, I sent him to Ann Summers to go and buy that. They're in our technical box. and we use them to play darts downstairs. So that's big, but like the brief itself pretty boring. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we did a sex toy project, which will be kind of coming out in kind of next couple of months. And whilst it's really not a strange brief at all, there, because we were doing most of the work remotely, there was a lot of samples, and when they're all over your desk and you're on a phone call, you do tend to just like pick up and start playing with the things that you have around, and sometimes your hands are just outside the shot, but what you're waving around isn't outside the shot. And my colleague was on a call with her mother and was like waving this rather large vibrator around, and her mother was like, is that a sex toy you're holding? And you have to sort of, well, I mean, it's easy enough to explain the job that we're doing, but there's always that moment of like,
I think that's it. I think it leads to just some really awkward conversations and discussions in the team, which then just become really good fun and like bonding sessions and stuff as well. But yeah, some of the materials that are used in these products are just fabulous. They're just really tactile and exciting to use. The colours just super interesting, and yeah, you just end up sort of just like tinkering with them when they're
definitely.
Really,
yeah. If anyone came into the office kind of summer last year and looked through the glass meeting rooms windows, then they would have seen some interesting kind of, I wouldn't say positions is really not a word you want to say when talking about these things with regards to colleagues, but yeah, certainly kind of trying to understand and communicate your thinking without being too graphic to your colleagues is, you get past the embarrassment very, very quickly.
Yeah. You don't want to share too much because there's obviously there's people involved that know some of these people. You're like, well, okay, this is a thing. This is something we have to tackle. Yeah, I like it. I like when you get into those sort of just when the conversation takes on a weird landscape and you're not sure whether you're even supposed to be there or not.
Yeah, I might have to edit this next line out, but to kind of complete this full circle, I made a placement with a chap for a sex-based company. It's called Mystery Vibe, and his name was Dave, and so it was like an all-male company from pretty much from top to bottom, and that's kind of a good living example, I suppose, of like, there's no women in that team. And it's just like the product is not aimed for people called Dave. Like it's just it's just not. And I'm sure he's a fantastic kind of product designer in his own right, and a lovely fella, but it's just one of those living examples of it's like, but it's not for you, Dave. It's been lovely having you on, Joe. Thanks for taking the time on a Thursday evening.
Nice to meet you and nice to have a chat.
No, absolutely. It's been an absolute